Good evening. Thank you for inviting me to lecture to this Theosophical Society. Actually, this brings back memories from many years ago. I studied in Zurich, Switzerland. That's where I went to university. I studied architecture, and there I had a lot of interest in all types of esoteric teachings in the European culture. In Switzerland, of course, we speak French and German, and I had an Oxford and Cambridge matriculation, so it gave me a sort of a good base to study the three cultures. And living in Switzerland at that time, I got introduced to Carl Gustav Jung, who was just 2 kilometers north of the university where I studied, Polytechnic in Zurich, and the works of Rudolf Steiner. And at that same time, I was introduced to Pythagorean harmonics. So I had quite a lot of interest in esoteric sciences, besides, of course, my work as an engineer in modern physics and all that. At that time, I went back to Egypt after I finished my studies, and it was in the late 60s, early 70s. And there, the first thing I did, I was appointed as consultant to Minister of Health, and my first project was the upgrade of the Museum of Ancient Egyptian Medicine. There, I met a group which introduced me to all the esoteric schools and societies in Egypt. So I had a very long-lasting, let's say, relationship with most of those societies, from the Sufis to the Coptic to the ancient Egyptian. And at that time, I was invited to join a society called the Society of Ancient Wisdom. This society was an Egyptian society that was formed after the 1952 revolution, when they closed all the societies in Egypt, like Freemasonry, Rosicrucians, and Theosophical Society. Now they were closed. This society started, Society of Ancient Wisdom. It started with 14 persons from the Theosophical Society who actually got all the books, the library, and everything that had to do, everything that was in the Theosophical Society. They took that and formed with that the core of the Society of Ancient Wisdom. At that time, I was invited, me and my wife were invited to join. And with us, we were the sort of the first 16 members. And so we studied a lot of theosophical teachings with other esoteric teachings. It was a period where I was very much acquainted with all the literature, the books, and everything of the Theosophical Society. So actually, giving this presentation takes me back to that time and gives me fond memories that I have. Now, let's go to my work, which is called BioGeometry. Now, what is BioGeometry? BioGeometry, you can understand it from its name. Geometry comes originally from the ancient Egyptian practice of surveying the land. Every year, the floods covered the lands around the Nile, and after the floods receded, they had to survey the land, measure everything again, give the farmers their lots, and for tax reasons, they had to be very exact. So Egypt was called, at the time of the ancient Egyptians, one of the names was the surveyed land. So geometry, metry means measurement, Geo is the Earth, so it comes from surveying the Earth. Now, I added a word here called BioGeometry. This word didn't exist before that, so I added it. The reason for adding bio, instead of surveying physical aspects of the Earth, adding the bio meant we measure the life force of the Earth. So here we needed a new name, and we called it BioGeometry. It had to do with the life force of our planet, of which we are a part. We are part of that life force because we live inside the Earth, not on it, because the atmosphere is part of the body of the Earth. So let us go a bit and see what is this life force we're speaking about. Biogeometry is based on a physics of quality. So it's an abstract scientific body of work that has no doctrine, doesn't adhere to any beliefs or so. It's a purely scientific way of looking at things. It bridges mainstream science with esoteric knowledge in one practical science that has to do with life force. Because, as you know, life force is animating force in the universe. So let us look at life force in more detail. The easiest way to imagine what life force is to look at our breathing. We breathe in and breathe out. So we interact with life force in a balanced pulse. It's a sort of a pulse, inward, outward. Now, this action of drawing life force in, drawing or breathing life force out, has two properties. When we draw life force in, we are getting this abstract life force, and the motion towards us comes in a clockwise spiraling motion. And this force, when it comes into our lungs, there is a sort of, we're putting an order into it. An order that is put into it through the shape of the lungs. So, shaping the life force coming in gives it a certain pattern, and this pattern gives it a certain function. So, the life force that was out, that was in a sort of disorder or no special order, comes in, gains order, and gains pattern, gains function through shaping. Now, this is called, this gaining of order is called negentropy. When you breathe out, you lose this order that was in it, and it goes out, dissipates, called entropy. So entropy is dissipation of order, and when it comes in, negentropy is actually the order that is put on the energy. Now here there is a law, and this law goes as follows. You shape energy, you get function. So shape, energy, function. Now here, the lung shapes energy. And when it shapes energy, it gives function. So we have function, and then the outgoing energy means we're taking away the order and releasing it out there. So if we look at life force, we interact with it as a pulse, there is a very delicate balance between ingoing and outgoing, between positive and negative aspects of life force, an ingoing spiral and an outgoing spiral that are actually in perfect balance through the center from which they emanate. Now, this energy emanates from a center, and center is not a point. Center is a sort of a multidimensional quality that goes through different levels. So the centering of the life force, or the balancing of the life force, happens from a higher dimension. Now, this balance of life force is very important for life on our planet, very important for our health, very important for even our emotional, mental levels, and all those up to the spiritual level. They're sort of all kept in this harmony, balancing all those levels. And in every level, we have the two outgoing and ingoing forces in balance. Now, let us take that a bit further and look at modern civilization and what is happening today in the environment. Now, we are in the age of modern technology. We're in the information age, and this age is based mainly on the carrier wave, the electromagnetic waves of the information age. So electromagnetic waves move like this in the atmosphere, and every day we have more electromagnetic radiation in the atmosphere for more communication. Maybe one day the atmosphere will become like a hard disk, actually, where we can access everything at any time and manipulate everything in different ways. Now, let us look at what does this have to do, or how it affects life force. Now, if anything moves like this, it produces heat. And heat produces dryness. So, in a way, electromagnetic radiation has an effect on global warming, although we do not want to admit it. But the more electromagnetic radiation we put in the atmosphere, the more we affect global warming. Now, when systems warm, comes with it automatically is a sort of a dehydration. So what we have now in nature is an enhanced dehydration effect. All living systems on Earth are dehydrated one way or another. That's why we need to drink so much water today to keep our systems hydrated. But it is not the amount of water we drink. It is actually the ability of the body to get the necessary amount of water in the cells that it needs. And even if you drink a lot of water, you're still, to a certain extent, dehydrated. Now, with dehydration, we have another problem. Dehydration means loss of water, and life force actually exists in water. So this movement that we call life force, the spiraling movement, exists not in water as we see it in liquid water, but through the laws of harmonics. If you take a musical instrument and you hit a note, then every note on a higher octave, let's say double the string length or half the string length, will resonate with it. So everything you see in the physical world has higher dimensions on subtle energy levels. From emotional, mental, spiritual, goes in all the levels. So you have water actually on all the levels. So when I'm speaking about water here, I'm speaking about multidimensional water. A water that goes from the spiritual all the way down to the physical, and that is how life force flows into the water. Now, with dehydration, we lose life force. That means our immunity is lowered. When the immunity is lowered, that is when we have pandemics and we have disease and we have so many things. And when the immunity is lowered, we start using chemicals with the plants and things like that in order to protect them from all types of parasites. And then those chemicals have their own side effects. So we're in sort of a downward flowing vicious circle of loss of immunity. We cannot continue that way. Otherwise, one day, there'll be global life extinctions. There's a sort of a hidden time bomb in the age of information. Now, we're under the impression that by converting everything to electrical cars, smart cities and things like that, that we are saving the environment. In reality, we're causing global life extinction on Earth if we don't find a solution to restore life force. And now, that is what biogeometry is all about. It's about restoring life force. Now, how do you restore life force? Let's go back to the example of the lungs. Now, it is the forming process that somehow puts a pattern and gives a function to life force. So the same forming process that gives function to the life force can actually restore the harmony. Now, the forming process is not just in the physical dimension. It's, let's say, multidimensional forming process where you have centers of multidimensional communication in all living organisms. They are like vortices connecting from the physical all the way to the spiritual. And through this vortex there, or vortices in nature, you have the flow of order, you have the flow of function from the archetypal levels, the causal levels, down into the forming process in nature, and they govern and guide the evolution of shapes in nature. So this is how life force works in nature. So what we have to do to rebalance the life force is to enhance, reinforce the centering connection to those higher dimensions. Now, by doing that, you bring back the life force into things. Now, let us look at modern technology, man-made products, and how they compare with natural products in nature. Now, like we said, natural products are connected to life force, so they all have a certain amount of life force in them, and they exchange life force. Now, we come and we sort of have our own products, our own human-made products. So we are putting lifeless shapes into a living body. And that's a very dangerous thing. As it increases, you will have become like a cancerous effect in the body of the earth, because our modern technology is not aware of the life force variable that should be included in any product. Otherwise, this product is not connected to nature. It is not part of the earth. It is something foreign in the body of the earth. It needs to have this connection. So, in biogeometry, we look at nature and try to decipher what kind of design language is needed to bring back the life force into whatever we design. Now, I'll give you just a small example like that. If you live in the United States and you do not speak the language of the country or understand it. Now, what happens when you don't speak it or understand it? You do not play an active role in your society. So, what we have a divine pen that is writing and drawing all the natural shapes that you see in front of you, and nobody's able to read. So we're living in nature without speaking its language. So we have to try to understand the natural forming process and start using it to produce things that are somehow integrated into the life force of the earth. That means we have to have design principles of shape that bring in the life force into shape. Now, I was sitting with one of my friends, a very well-known scientist, and we were discussing the artificial intelligence and how artificial intelligence would be able to create a sort of a greater mind than the human mind, and we would be sort of negligible in intelligence compared to it. And so we discussed this. If we come to such a level, that means this new artificial intelligence mind will not have to interact with us, because if it becomes more intelligent, that means we become sort of a side product, and this side product is not really needed for optimizing the future of this modern technology or this thing. So we will have a mind that is very, very advanced, but the problem is in choosing its optimal solutions, it might even think that the best thing would be to get rid of humanity, this sort of thing standing in its way, because humanity is not up to its level, so it gets rid of it, because this computer mind wouldn't have any conscience. It wouldn't have any values. It is just optimizing and working with its set of data. If we look at this mind, we do not have life here. We have a sort of control, analysis of data, but no real life, no real emotional, mental energy. Because I always give the example of, I say I have a friend called Dr. Fish. Dr. Fish lives in the ocean, and he's sitting in his lab trying to use artificial intelligence to create water. It sounds funny, but we are living in a subtle energy background, which is actually a living background. This is life force, a multidimensional life force, and we are just like leaves in the ocean floating on the surface of this life force. So how can we think that we need to create something that is actually, that we are actually part of it? We breathe it. We are part of this life force. So in biogeometry here, we start using design principles that can achieve an interaction with this life force. The design principles are design principles of shape. And to give you an example, can we have design principles that bring in life force into matter? To tell you the truth, it's a question that has been answered thousands of years ago. They were in ancient civilizations. They were always able to bring life force into matter. I think my dog here wants to be part of the presentation. I'm keeping her out of the room, so she's not happy. She wants to attend. So let me continue now. So let us take an example of a statue, a human wooden statue. when here, my daughter brought me the statue, thank you, Doreya. Here is a human statue. Now, I want to study the way shapes relate to life force. Now, if I want to contain water, I shape my hand or shape a cup in order to contain water. But if I want to contain something non-physical, a physical shape will not help me contain it. But I want to contain this invisible dimension in a physical shape. Now, how can I do it? Actually, this is done through resonance of shape. Because if you enter into resonance with anything, you have information exchange. And the information exchange actually brings them together. So each contains the other. Now, how can we do this? In biogeometry, we have researched the resonance between shapes and the planes of nature. In theosophy, of course, you know, you have the divisions of the planes of nature, like vitality, etheric is one, and then part of the physical, then you have emotional, you have mental, and then you have the higher mentals, and then the spiritual levels. Now, we're using a similar categorization, so in planes of nature, and we divide each plane into 12 subplanes, and then we have geometrical shapes that resonate with each of the subplanes. Now, I can't show you experiments now of how we derive that, but this is part of the physics of quality, and we have the shapes that enter into resonance with each of the subplanes. Now, those shapes, when used in the forming process of any object, each shape will connect to the subplane in which it is in resonance. And so, natural shapes, all shapes in nature, have all those subplane resonant shape configurations that actually bring in all the levels of the life force into the shape and contain them. So you contain them through geometrical resonance. That's how you contain the higher dimensions. Now let me take the human body. Now we know that in a human body, where can I test the occurrence of life shape, life force, and this multidimensional communication? We have energy centers or energy wheels that are referred to as chakras, and those chakras are actually, like I have a heart chakra, I have a throat chakra, eyebrow chakra, and each one is a vortex communicating between multidimensional levels. Now, I use my measuring instruments, and those measuring instruments, I cannot go too much into how I measure, how I use certain pendular instruments related to torsion effects and things like that, because it cannot be done in an hour. But suffice to say that we have found that in every place where you have a human center, a human chakra, we have a chakra on the statue. Now, what does it mean having a chakra on the statue? Means that you have life force. Means that you have all the biological functions of the location of that chakra in the statue. But my statue, on a physical level, is not properly formed. Maybe I have formed the angles, I have formed everything, but I have not formed the material. So what will happen? It will contain all those energies of life, but it will not move, it will not animate. But all the other levels will be contained in it. So what we show that you can actually activate a chakra or increase its emission by raising the hands like that. Let's say the heart chakra, I raise those two hands on the level of the heart chakra. Because by moving the hands, each time I move the hands, the centers of gravities move with it. So actually when I do this, the heart chakra increases. So if I want to activate my heart chakra as a human being, all I have to do is this. My brow chakra, I do this. So throat chakra, I do this. So same thing with the statue. And then we test people sitting in front of the statue with bioresonance machines, and we see where they have a deficient, let's say, organ function, biological function in the body, with which chakra it's related. Then I place the statue with the right posture in front of them, and all of a sudden you can see a change in the life force in the body and the balance. That means that the statue itself has carried this information. It carries all the levels of light force and emits it to the person. Of course, the ancients, when they did this with the statue, they placed the statue on a sacred power spot so that they have the extra connection, higher connection to the statue. Now, this is just to show you that nature uses a design language. It uses design principles that actually draw in the life force. The ancient Egyptians used to speak about their temples as the house of the netters. Netters mean nature forces that we erroneously refer to as gods, but they were nature forces. Now, the temple was built through certain proportions in a certain power spot in order to actually connect to all the higher forces of nature so that it becomes a house of the netters. So now that we know that the ancients did it, the ancients invited the life force into every activity they did. They invited the life force. Now, biogeometry is a physics of quality, and it is based on a design language. The simplest maybe rule to understand in this design language, I'll just tell you one of the principles: rotation. Because any rotation that you do will automatically sort of amplify a center, an invisible center somewhere. So a rotation is one of the principles of connection, because rotation creates a center, center creates a vortex. So this is one of the first design rules, is to use rotation. Rotation could be physical or could be virtual, and this would actually have a sort of connective effect. But let's go a step further and see this design language of biogeometry. Okay, I use it, those design principles, I use them in architecture, I use them in furniture design, I use them in everything. And you should not think that, why don't I just place a pyramid or a sphere? The whole idea is not looking at a certain shape as sacred. All shapes are sacred. You should look at the design principles behind shapes so that you can create your own shapes. You can design your own house. You can do this thing. Now, let me take you to an actual example, because what we've been saying now is very difficult to grasp without me showing a practical example of the use of biogeometry to balance the life force in nature. In 2003, I was invited by the Swiss government and the government mobile provider Swisscom to solve a problem that they had in one of the regions. This region is called Hamburg, Hamburg is part of the state of St. Gallen, and the people there were revolting. They wanted to dynamite the mobile towers and the high-tension towers. And so there was a huge problem with the government here, a big revolt happening, and they asked me to solve the problem. So I told them that, first of all, now how can you change an effect if you don't take away the cause? Those people are telling you, take away the cause of the effect. Those all sources that emit electromagnetic radiation should be taken away. The people don't want them because of what is happening. People were getting sick, headaches, high blood pressure, epilepsy, lots of things like that. And like many of the chronic diseases that we mention here, most of them had a rapid increase there. There was infertility with the cows, lack of milk, and things like that. There were so many environmental problems that the people had to revolt. And now they came to me, and cause and effect exist when you have a sort of a space-time relationship in linear time. Cause and effect exists on a sort of a physical level. But if you are using life force connections with multidimensional connection to higher levels, you start going beyond time and space, beyond physical time and space, and what happens is the law of causality is replaced by the law of resonance. So here you can actually bring in new qualities into things without moving the source. You can even bring those same qualities into the source because there's no causality here. It's just resonance. So all you have to do is use geometrical shapes that resonate with this quality and spread it to both the source and the recipient. So we, at the time, designed geometrical shapes that would emit this centering quality. The centering quality that balances both the inward and outward motion of life force. The centering quality is connected to this vortex. It creates a vortex, a multidimensional vortex, and we call this quality in biogeometry, we call it BG3. BG3 because we can detect it through three qualitative components. Now, I said here qualitative components because the physics of quality that we deal with places the human being at the center of measurement of all things. We want to sort of show how the human being is affected. So if you want to know how the human being is affected, you have to use him as the measure of all things. If we have a modern technology that places the human being out of the scientific formula because you don't want subjectivity, then you end up with a civilization with the human being given a lot of leisure, but he's out of the formula. So at the end, it's at his expense. But now, let's look at the physics of quality. The physics of quality, the human being is the measurement of things. So here, it's a different kind of physics. It's a physics that has to do with resonance, because quality, like I said in music, quality, you have a note and you can actually play a note, and then every note on a higher octave will resonate with it. Now, a physics of quality, imagine I have this musical string instrument and I know the law of resonance, the law of communication. Now imagine that I pull the instrument on the small side all the way to 0 and on the big side all the way to infinity. So I have a string instrument covering from 0 to infinity. And that means I have a communication of qualities between 0 and infinity. And in the points of attachment of the strings, these are the fixed points of the strings, I always have those central vortices, those centers of rotation. So here, through the fixed points of the strings, I have two things that happen. I have the secondary resonance between all the musical notes. So it's not just by one note and the other, between all the musical notes. So this string instrument shows me the unity of everything in the universe related to the centers of the fixed points. This is the basic, imagine this to be your basic instruments in the physics of quality. So we design geometrical shapes. Now the problem with geometrical shapes when I design them, each shape has a certain spread of effects. And if I have a shape that spreads, that can sort of rebalance energy, what do those shapes do? They are programmed to convert the loss of energy in the environment, because we are in a state through electromagnetic radiation, we're in a state of entropy, where we're losing energy, where we have a sort of anti-clockwise outgoing rotation of life force. Now, we want to put shapes that will restore, it will actually bring more life force in, restore the rotation of energy to the other side, and maybe push the balance a bit to the energizing side, so that we have what we call a positive entropy or negentropy. And then we can revitalize all systems again. Now, the shapes would automatically create around them this positive energizing state of life force. By the way, every tree does it. So every plant does it. So we're putting shapes here that create this. But I can't go putting a shape in the ground every 50 meters. So we looked at a way to spread this sort of quality of life force, how to spread this energizing quality of life force. So we asked them to be able to use the mobile towers. So now I can use the mobile emanations that go everywhere. I can place my shapes on them, add a certain quality of shape on the emission, and that way I can use very few shapes in relation to the towers, and those shapes would actually emit their qualities in the environment. Now, we did that, and within a week, we had a total transformation. 60% of all medical problems or symptoms of medical problems were reduced. Things like epilepsy completely disappeared from the region. There was a lot of psychological change in the people. When you feel an inner stress dissipating, on a psychological, mental way, the same thing happens. So people that were very aggressive with each other all the time became very friendly. The mayor thanked me for bringing peace to their place. Of course, the biggest effect was the medical, because that was what they saw, the health of humans, animals, and plants. So we restored everything, and this was called the Miracle of Hamburg. Books came out calling it, and television programs came out, and they spoke about the Miracle of Hamburg. Now, the government asked me later on to make a second area as a pilot project for a total Swiss solution for the whole country. But the new project had to have new criteria. They were afraid that since I was putting my shapes on the mobile towers, that people would understand it differently. They would think that I was correcting the harm coming out of the emanation and not using it as a carrier wave for the harmonizing energy quality. So they asked me, can you please find another carrier carrier wave system than the mobile towers? So they gave me a project in Hirschberg, Appenzell, and it's a valley about 20 kilometers diameter with a small hill in the middle. And there I told them I will use the energy of the earth, which actually can spread this quality everywhere. So we chose certain patterns in the earth, certain nodal points in those patterns, and we put the shapes in tubes, and we put water in the tubes, and then we buried them in those nodal points. We had 12 shapes buried in a central garden at the top of this hill in the middle of the whole canton or state of Appenzell. And we actually got the same results as in Hamburg. We got very, very promising effects. Now, actually, a few days ago, I got a phone call from Hamburg who told me that the people brought in 5G, and when they started installing 5G, they took away the shapes that we had installed in the towers, and I sent them new shapes to install, and they installed the new shapes, but then they told me, look, in Hirschberg, they don't have a problem because it's all in the ground. Here, anytime they come in, do maintenance on things like that, they can misalign the shape or the direction. So we are going to implement the same solution like in Hirschberg. We're going to implement it in Hamburg. We'll put things in the ground and take away the things in the tower, so they're put there once and for all. Nobody can take them off. But unfortunately, we have to wait a bit. I told them that we'll wait a year, up to 2 years, until the whole pandemic situation is better. But until then, in those 2 years, I sent them new shapes, they installed them, and everything was all right. So this is showing you that biogeometry has practical applications that you can implement and achieve the effect you want. In Canada, for example, we are raising chicken now for the 7th year without any vaccinations or any antibiotics, just with a geometrical shape in every barn. And it's been going fine for 7 years now, just by restoring the harmony in the life force. We achieve an energizing state that keeps the immunity of the chicks very high, and then they don't need any external interventions. And one funny story there, we had one of the people from the slaughterhouses telling us, we are calling your chicken Happy Chicken, because usually when they slaughter the chicken and they take away the feathers and all that, they have to sort of smoothen the skin of the chicken again, because it's all marked by scratching. You know, when they grow up in a confined space, they start scratching each other. So that has to be taken care of before it goes on the market. And they say, your chicken come with very smooth skin, as if they never scratch each other, or whether sleeping all the time, or what's happened. So we call them Happy Chicken, because there's no scratches at all on them. So I'm just giving you examples like that from applications that, or projects that we have done. And I've been researching or doing research projects in biogeometry for the past, let's say, biogeometry now is 50 years old. We have the 50th anniversary this year. And for the past 25 years, I've been supervising postgraduate research. Now, I'll give you examples of this postgraduate research for things that matter to each one of us. One of the postgraduate researches has to do, for example, with depression and how we can. This was done by a student of interior architecture. So the whole idea was how to use shapes in interior architecture that would relieve depression. So we did the whole thesis, and then we were told that the best way to let's validate this is by measuring the serotonin level in the blood, because in depression, the serotonin level in the brain drops, and in a normal brain, it should be up again. So this posed a hurdle, as at university they didn't want us to go and start taking blood samples and things like that. So they resorted to the medical department, where they did medical, they do medical testing, develop drugs and things using animals. So they told us they will do the research for us. So we gave them a geometrical shape, and they got rats, lab rats, and they had the control rats in one big cage or box, a second box, or 4 other boxes. Each had about 30 rats that were depressed rats. Now, I don't know how they can depress a rat. It's not my specialty. I don't like it, but they can either restrict the movement of the rat or the food or something. They have ways to depress them so that the rat becomes totally depressed, doesn't move, and they take the blood sample and it shows, let's say, the serotonin level dropping from 80 units to about 30 units. And then we have one box where we use a geometrical shape. We have 3 other boxes, each one using one of the most effective antidepressant drugs on the market, and they were given to the rats. And actually, BioGeometry restored the serotonin level in the rats between 70 and 80, and only one other drug was at that level with BioGeometry. All the others were much less. So here, this is an example of this research into depression. We have other researches with autism. So we have developed special geometrical shapes of pavilions that actually affect the way an autistic child perceives his surroundings. And we are now designing one of those projects for the government in Egypt, and we have a prototype pavilion in the garden of our office so that people can see for themselves, and they can bring the instructors and the kids and the doctors and evaluate this for themselves. Another research which has been published in an Imperial magazine in the United States, for example, shows the effect of radioactivity of building materials in your home on your health. In any home today, you might find ceramics or paints, some type of paints on the wall. They don't have to contain lead, but many other types of plastic paints, or some concrete blocks, or some other building materials. They can be radioactive. It's a low radioactivity that can be measured, and unfortunately today we don't have a law that tells building material manufacturers to provide the amount of radioactivity measured in their material. So this research had to do with building little houses with those radioactive materials, and again using rats in the different houses, the same exactly like depression. And one had the BioGeometry solutions, the other had no solution. There's no solution for radioactivity. And then you had the control ones. So the ones with no solution for radioactivity showed the tissues later on, showed a lot of damage and cancerous effects and all that. The control rats, of course, were normal. Now the ones with BioGeometry fared, in many cases, even better than the control rats. They are totally unaffected by the radioactivity. So this is again another use of BioGeometry in the environment. We have multiple uses showing, for example, the effect of BioGeometry in a home where you have wireless, any type of wireless. Now, the wireless in a home affects the people living in a home. In one project, we had to solve the problem of stress from wireless on the person inside, we had to solve it just through architectural design, not by putting a geometrical shape or something, no, by designing the apartment with the proper proportions so that any electromagnetic radiation inside it would actually be converted to a beneficent quality, and the people could enjoy it. We have, of this research, we have several. Some tested on humans, some tested on rats, we have several of those. But this to give you an idea of all the types of research that we've been doing in the past 25 years in university labs. We have, for example, printed textiles that were given to hyperactive children, and other printed textiles without the special designs that we put, and then the hyperactivity was reduced. So we have lots of research there for anybody who wants to have an idea or wants to start a new research project or a new solution. So we have a lot of validated research that does that. Now, if you compare, some people ask me, for example, I had an email asking me to show the difference between biogeometry and Feng Shui, or biogeometry and Vasto, and biogeometry and sacred geometry in this talk. Actually, it takes us out of the context of the talk, but just to give you a word or two, those ancient traditions, whether it's sacred geometry, Feng Shui, or Vastu, did not deal with modern technology. They're ancient traditions that dealt with natural forces. They did not have modern technology to deal with. So today they do not deal with modern technology. They're totally ineffective in it. And now sacred geometry is maybe in a way close to biogeometry because it's using proportions and shapes. But if you look at the core, I'll give you one example to show the difference. If you take the mathematical series from sacred geometry, it's a Fibonacci series. So where you have 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and so on. And when you divide each number by the number before it, you get 1.6, which is the golden mean. In the beginning, it's not exactly 1.6, but as you go along, it adjusts 1.6. So there's a mathematical series in there. So sacred geometry is based on the quantitative aspect of a proportion. Now, in biogeometry, a biogeometry series goes like that. It goes 16, 19, 28, 34. There's no relationship whatsoever between the numbers. So why do we call it a qualitative series? So a qualitative series means that all the numbers resonate with the same quality, although they have no mathematical relationship. So you can have a red qualitative series where all the numbers resonate with the color red. Another one that all the numbers resonate with green, if you have a green series. The biogeometry series means that all the numbers resonate with the center, with the centering quality that we find in sacred power spots. So here it shows you the difference between a physics of quality and the qualitative science and a normal science. That's why in the physics of quality of biogeometry, it's a modern physics that deals with solution that can be applied to anything. There's no doctrine about it. There's nothing. And if you go into the physics of quality, you will find somehow that all the esoteric principles are in there, as well as all the scientific principles are merged together in one harmonious science. So this is, if you go to, for example, Feng Shui. Feng Shui is a tradition that is related to location and culture. So, for example, if you have the placement of color in Feng Shui, it's placement of color according to the coordinates. And now you go a bit to the south, and then you have India, and you have a similar feng shui called Vastu. Now, there the placement of the color is different. So in feng shui, they tell you, oh, close the building from the north and open it to the south, because that's the weather there. So the whole orientation, the whole concept of distributing qualities deals with a benevolent southern direction and the harmful northern direction. Now, if you go to the south in Vastu in India, it becomes the opposite. Now, you want to open to the north or northeast and close to the south. You don't want the heat of the south. You want the other. So these are ancient traditions that have to do with the culture and the place. Feng Shui, when you go to the north, it's a mountainous area. So you have the form school of Feng Shui, where forms have a meaning. If you go to the south, you have plains, so directions have more meaning than forms. So these are things related to culture and related to place. First of all, they do not have any relationship with modern technology, so they cannot solve it. Second of all, you cannot keep taking things from a certain location in China or in India and taking it and applying it in another place in the world without really studying the properties of the place. So this shows you that Feng Shui, Vastu, are ancient traditions linked to cultures and places. Sacred geometry is a science of proportion. And so it's a quantitative science of achieving harmony through proportion. BioGeometry is a qualitative science of connecting to the centering multidimensional vortex through a physics of quality. So I hope that this little explanation at the end answers the email I got from one of the persons who were linked to this presentation, who asked me to say a few words on that. Now, I thank you very much, and I'm honored to have been able to lecture to your esteemed society. Thank you.